so many ways to go about talking about MJ and what you wrote about in the book. My question to you is this. Here is clearly one of the great basketball minds of all time. We all know what his physical gifts were as a player, but it was between his ears where he truly excelled. So my question to you is, if he's so smart at basketball, why is the team that he owns the laughingstock of the NBA? And he didn't have a great record in Washington either. It's hard for me to square the circle. Either the skills and intellect that he had as a player don't translate to the owner's box, or maybe the ego that he had as a player doesn't translate to the owner's box. Solve the mystery.
Yeah, that's a really a curiosity and a question that I got from Jerry Reinsdorf. I was in his box in spring training last year watching the Dodgers. Actually, I was invited by the Dodgers to go down and spend some time with the team. And the White Sox, they share a facility down in the Phoenix area. And Jerry Reinsdorf said, you know, if you really want to get back in basketball, why don't you go help your buddy Michael Jordan out? And I've never had, you know, any calls from Michael except about coaching. Last year, he called me up and asked, 2 years ago, asked me about some coaching candidates. And at that point, he was looking at someone that was new and fresh in the game. But I really don't know what it is. I mean, in Washington, you know, he went back and hired Doug Collins, and you know they had a first draft pick, and they drafted Kwame Brown. And I talked to Michael a considerable amount about Kwame Brown because, as you know, I brought him in to the Lakers,
right? And
you know, gave up Caron Butler, who I liked as a player, but I knew we needed a big guy. We needed a big guy that could hold the middle. And that time they were pretty devoid of a solid power player. And he told me that Kwame, you know, busted everybody one-on-one in that group. I think it was Bosch was in that group, but I forget the other big guy. But they had them all in. And Kwame, who had skills as a guard, had one-on-one skills, but as a player, catching the ball and playing with his back to the basket did not have that skill. So they didn't get that. They didn't register that. So obviously they missed a point there in that draft choice. You really can't mess up when you have the first pick in the draft. That's a real tough thing to do. And I think, you know, that's some of the things that caused demise. And obviously he's 38, playing basketball at that time, trying to play, you know, trying to be a leader of these young men, but yet have to really monitor his minutes and his time and being on the court so that he can play these games. I think that really wasn't a fair example of his leadership or ownership in the Washington franchise. With Charlotte, you know, he's brought in, you know, mostly people that he knows, close friends. Rod Higgins is there as kind of in charge of the operation. And Rod's a really close friend with Michael. And I think sometimes you can't do that. One of the things I talk about when I give talks about basketball, about that, is about staffing your organization. And what's been found out is you don't need people that are your friends or think alike or your genre of friendship group to be on your staff. You need someone outside of that group.
People who will challenge you, give you a fresh perspective.
And people who will say no, and somebody you can be in an argument with because you're not going to hurt their feelings because they're your friend.
So maybe that's the ego part that doesn't translate so well.
Yeah, and it's also part, you know, wanting to help your friends out, and you know, this is something we can control and somebody I can control. You don't want someone you can control. You want someone that's going to challenge you and make distinction by doing that. The other thing is it's considered a small market. Charlotte's really considered a mid-market, I would say, but it's, you know, it looks like a small market venue. At one point, they led the NBA in attendance, maybe 5 years in a row with that team, and then everything kind of fell apart. So they've had to build a new organization, a new appeal to the NBA in Charlotte. That's not been easy to do.
It's not exactly breaking news that Michael Jordan isn't the biggest sweetheart in the world. We know that he was competitive. We know he could be mean, he could be tough. His Hall of Fame induction speech, I thought, was a real low moment for him. I just thought it was the wrong place and the wrong time for him to express that side of his personality. Were you disappointed that he chose that moment to be so small?
unfortunately, I wasn't there. I went to a bar, and they had it on a cable, and I went in there. And the bar was packed with people listening to Michael's speech, and I caught the visual of him saying things, and it would flash to Pat Riley and so forth, but I couldn't hear all of it. So later on, I called up one of my former staff members, Johnny Bach, a former coach with the Chicago Bulls, and asked him about it, and he said, that was vintage Michael Jordan.
Doesn't sound like a compliment.
Michael had been asked, what drives you? What has driven you to reach these goals that you've had or reach this status that you've had as a player? And so he took that moment to tell everybody what drove him. And it was all these negative things. My high school coach cut me. He brought his high school coach to the Hall of Fame induction, actually, paid for his trip up there. You know, this happened to me. You know, Dean Smith did put me as an inclusive member of the team that won the NCAA championship. There were 4 guys on that picture, but I wasn't included in that picture. That drove me, so forth and so on. They said I couldn't play defense. That drove me to be a defensive player. I was MVP. You know, Pat Riley had his team knock me down, not pick me up after knocking me down. That drove me. You know, so he told everybody about those moments that piqued his competitive edge. And to know Michael Jordan is this: Michael sees weakness in people. Also, the trait that Kobe Bryant has, I didn't really mention that much in the book, but if he saw that individuals were weak, he attacked and kept attacking until they quit. And that was an individual. I don't know about his group tendencies, but his individual tendencies was to go at that weakness. And so those are things that drove him, the little things that drove him.
So whether it's in a practice with the Chicago Bulls or accepting induction into the Basketball Hall of Fame,
Or
Michael's just gonna
picking
be
a
Michael.
player to be the player that you want. You know, maybe he's not the best team player, but he thought maybe he's the best individual player that could tear down the other opponents at his level. We used to have trouble thinking about who are we going to get on this team that can be a backup guard to go against Michael in practice every day without him
Just destroying you.
just destroying this person during the course of the year.